Welcome to FNTV. This is the channel to watch if you are interested in stocks, in growth companies. And joining us today from company headquarters in Norway, we have Torbjørn Jenssen. Nice to see you.
Nice to be back again.
Yes, nice to have you. So before we get into your report, what is your take on the market for cryptocurrencies so far this year?
I mean, obviously it's been shaking. But so too has the broader capital markets. You have the situation where inflation is record high in the US and the central banks are now planning to hike interest rates. This has led to kind of a shift away from risk stocks, and in the short run, cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin has also been treated as a high risk investment, meaning that it has followed kind of tech companies, growth companies down. However, it's important to highlight that if you look at adoption, if you look at infrastructure being built out, that is happening at an ever faster pace. So fundamentally, Bitcoin is in a very strong position. Another important point to highlight as well is that cryptocurrencies, digital assets are here to stay. So there will be fluctuations following the market sentiment, but the underlying kind of adoption curve is here. So it's more similar to the dot-com bubble in a way, where the internet was here to stay. Yes, you have volatility in the short run, but long term, this is definitely a sector that will be with us. Another important point is, of course, also that while some companies might struggle with profitability when interest rates grow, there is no default risk, there's no bankruptcy risk for Bitcoin. So that means that Bitcoin is actually more robust as an investment in many ways than single companies.
And just looking at the market and looking at the news every day, it seems like there's a lot of new players in this space spending a lot of money on marketing and now coming to Europe from the US, for example.
Yes, absolutely. So there's now a lot of exchanges really competing for the users. And as you say, we see massive marketing campaigns. This sector is very active still, and there's a lot happening, and there's a lot of competition, especially on the exchange level.
Right. And I think we started to see some really big venture capitalists move into this space now again, just last year and this year, right?
Yes, absolutely. So we continue to see a lot of venture capital being deployed. We continue to see the institutional adoption, and very interestingly, we see groups of investors who didn't participate in the industry in the past now slowly and surely coming back to this coming to this industry for the first time. And very interestingly, we are seeing a lot of that because a lot of these big investors, wealth managers, and banks are actually reaching out to us. They've seen our research, they kind of know that we are experts and trust us, and they reach out to get our help and guidance when they now are moving into the space.
Right. And that's actually a really good segue to get into your Q3 earnings report that you released this morning. What are your main takeaways in that from your point of view?
I guess it's our Q1 report, but I think the main takeaway is that this trend we've seen over time, where we have had these companies, these institutions reaching out, is accelerating. And this is something we have really worked on over, say, the last kind of year, half year especially, to position Arcane in a way where we are able to capitalize on this trend. So we communicated in earlier reports how we are kind of tweaking our operation, bringing all the offerings into one unified platform. And now in this report, we are revealing that we are really targeting the private banking segment, the wealth management segment. And this is exactly because it's where we've seen the most activity already. I mean, if you look at our fund, if you look at our trading, that's where we get the volume already from high net worth individuals. But also if we see, look at inbound calls, we see a lot of interest here, and we see a big market opportunity tailoring our services for the private banking sector.
Interesting. So, I mean, we've seen many new players, as we mentioned earlier, entering this space in the Nordics. Do you think that you are starting to find your place in this evolving ecosystem as a company now then?
Absolutely. And I also have to kind of underscore the point that we are not only a Nordic play. We are offering some of our services globally, and kind of the European market is our core market. We're not on the Nordic player. That said, the competition we're seeing between exchanges is actually very good for us, because we are not in direct competition with the likes of Binance and Coinbase and Crypto.com. We're instead building on top of these exchanges. We're embracing a broker model where we source liquidity, tokens, and productize that, and we source that liquidity on these exchanges. So what we expect is that margins will be squeezed on the exchange level. We see some of the giants internationally coming into the local markets, all of them competing for retail. And this creates opportunity for us to kind of build on top and then productize it and direct those products towards the private banking, high net worth, family office segment. And it's also important for me to stress that this isn't as much a shift in Arcane, because this is a group that we're already serving, as it is us doubling down on where we have the most traction.
Got it. Okay, so let's move on. Let's get into the numbers. You mentioned last quarter that you were on track to become cash flow positive for the full year. Now we've seen some shifts in the market. What's the update on that?
Yeah, so if you look at our top line first, we've seen a close to 30% drop in line with a drop in general market activity, which is actually for Bitcoin trading a little bit more than 30%. So we are not immune to those activity kind of fluctuations. However, we've seen a somewhat improvement in our result, EBITDA being up a little more than 1 million, only a loss of around 2 million. But that is not cash flow positive. And the reason is that the mining has not been as profitable as we anticipated. We are now seeing electricity prices in southern Norway that are 100x higher than what they were a year ago. So that has really hurt the profitability of our mining operation. The good thing, however, is that the machines are still as good as when they were new. And we are now very close to securing hosting in northern Norway, where the prices are way, way lower and the profitability will be much higher. And we expect to move our full machine park to northern Norway in the near term. And that will, all else equal, kind of really improve the profitability of that operation and kind of filter into the larger operation.
Okay. So what's the timeline then for being profitable now that it seems to have, like it has shifted on both due to the electricity prices that you mentioned, but also general market activity?
So it's hard to set a precise date. We have some very promising dialogues, but like nothing is certain until it's certain. This is something that we will obviously kind of update the market on once we move the machines. Also, the profitability of mining doesn't only depend on electricity cost. Bitcoin has also taken a substantial hit recently. And depending on the future development of the Bitcoin price, that will also affect kind of the overall profitability. Long term, we still see this investment as lucrative, and we are long-term optimistic on the Bitcoin price. But it's a little bit hard right now to estimate precisely when or if cash flow neutrality will be reached from the mining perspective.
Okay.
That said, it's also very good to see that we do see increased revenue from some of our other business units, in particular Arcane Research, which has been less cyclical. So where our exchange businesses have kind of followed the downturn in the market, Arcane Research has really benefited from the increased appetite for marketing in the industry and the need for more content and knowledge.
Got it. Yeah, I guess that's one of the advantages of being diversified and having businesses in a few different areas. So I guess strategically, what are the big opportunities and related milestones for your investors to look forward to now during the coming quarter and the coming year?
Yeah, so communicated earlier, the big thing we are working on is to unifying our offering on this one tech stack. We've launched the research application during the quarter as the first application on the new Arcane platform. And we expect to launch both an initial version of the investment application and eventually also an initial version of the trading application during the rest of this year. In addition, we are using research as kind of the door opener and way to secure partnerships. Initially, we sell our content. We teach different institutions and companies, their employees or their user base about the space. but we very much see that as a first step towards being in a good position to sell other services in the future further down the line. So as an investor, I would really look for those partnerships going forward and see those as the first step in a longer sales funnel.
Okay, so looking at the other side of the coin, and we've talked about the opportunities, then what are the big challenges that you see now for the rest of the year?
So it's important for me to highlight that we don't have any major blockers. So there's nothing stopping our development right now. Of course, the volatility and the appetite for cryptocurrencies affect the revenue from some of our business lines, but it doesn't change our long-term building. So we don't have any major blockers. There's a lot happening on the regulation front, and we are following that closely. We are working with regulators and trying to also influence the regulation so that it becomes more productive, striking the right balance between protection and innovation opportunities. So overall, no major blockers. I guess there's one area where there is a blocker. We communicated earlier that we are working with Valor to launch an ETP, so a listed product backed by our hedge fund. We got the approval from the Swedish FSA on the prospectus before Christmas, and we said that we expected to actually get that off the ground and listed during this first quarter. That has not happened, and the reason is that the different exchanges are currently a little bit reluctant to list new crypto products. That only shows how early we are. We are confident that this will happen eventually, but now we have the prospectus, we have the regulators' approval, and now it's down to the different exchanges that we and Valor are working with to actually decide to go for it, which means that it's a little less under our control. So I can't give a timeline, but I can say it will happen. We strongly believe there will be a future with listed basket products, ETPs on exchanges, and we are at the very cutting edge together with Valor launching such a product.
Okay. And what's the update on the OTC listing in the US that you've communicated that you're working on too in the past?
Yeah, so that was only waiting for our audited financials for last year. And we sent that over and ticked all the boxes fairly recently. However, there's also a technical requirement of a share unit price of at least 1 cent. And currently our share price is below that. We are not planning any reverse split. So from that perspective, that listing process is on pause or on hold. However, we expect that to change in the future and with improved market conditions that we will continue and then finalize the listing process on OTC markets in the US in due course.
Okay. And we're getting to the end of the time we have for this interview. But finally, looking at something that I know a lot of viewers are interested in hearing your opinion on, what is your outlook for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies for the rest of the year? What will happen?
So I think if we start with cryptocurrencies, what we're already seeing is a flight to safety. And within crypto, that means money flowing into basically Bitcoin and Ether. So you see a lot of smaller coins, newer projects getting hit a lot harder. I think the rest of the year might be very shaky. The world around us is very shaky. There are interest rate hikes coming. There's an ongoing war in Europe. There's supply chain issues and inflation. So that trickles into the crypto sector in the short run. But as I said, in the opening question here, I think what is important to realize is that the adoption of cryptocurrencies, digital assets, are still moving ahead very much. And actually, a lot of the use cases are becoming even more relevant in a shaky world. So short term, it'll follow risk appetite. Long term, the adoption curve will be the main driver. And nothing has happened since the start of this year that has made me kind of bearish long term on Bitcoin, rather the opposite.
All right. Well, thank you, Torbjørn, again for joining us from HQ in Norway, and thank all of you who tuned in and watched. We'll see you next time.